The night I ventured into Ogden Canyon was supposed to be just another quiet drive, but what happened next was anything but ordinary. I had heard the rumors about a ghostly train, but I thought it was just that, rumors. That was until I heard the whistle in the distance, felt the cold chill wash over me, and saw the tracks glow in the moonlight. It wasn't a trick of the eyes. The train was real, and I wasn't alone. Keep watching, because what I saw next changed my life forever. It was a late summer night, just past midnight, when I decided to take a drive through Ogden Canyon. The air was cool, and the road was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves from the nearby trees. I had heard the legends of the ghost train, but like most, I brushed them off as nothing more than stories told by locals to keep their town interesting. Ogden Canyon, nestled in the mountains of Utah, has a history of strange happenings and eerie occurrences. Over the years, it's been the subject of ghost stories, particularly about a train that was said to have crashed in the early 1900s. The tale goes that the train's engine, loaded with passengers, plunged off the tracks, and in the chaos, many lives were lost. But not all the souls departed. Locals swore they could hear the sound of a train whistle late at night, and some even claimed to have seen the shadow of the phantom locomotive cutting through the fog. I had heard these stories, but that was all they were to me. Stories. I never thought for a second that I'd become part of the legend. I was about 10 miles into the canyon when it happened. As I rounded a sharp bend in the road, I thought I saw something strange. At first, it appeared to be a faint light, almost like the headlight of a train coming through the trees. But that didn't make sense. There was no train track in sight. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I slowed the car, my headlights cutting through the thick shadows. That's when I heard it, a long, drawn-out whistle. It wasn't the sound of a regular train, though. This whistle had an unnatural echo to it, as if it were coming from miles away, but still close enough to send a shiver down your spine. My heart raced. I looked around, searching for any sign of the train, but all I could see were the dark shapes of the canyon's cliffs. And then, as if on cue, the ground beneath me seemed to tremble. I thought it was just my nerves, but the vibrations grew stronger. The air became colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I shivered, suddenly feeling like I wasn't alone. It felt like something was watching me from the shadows. My breath quickened, and I had to remind myself to stay calm. The whistle echoed again, louder this time, and I swear I could hear the sound of clanking metal, the screech of wheels against old, worn tracks. Panic set in, and I quickly turned on my headlights to full blast. I wanted to leave, to turn back, but curiosity held me in place. Then I saw it, a shadow moving along the tracks up ahead. It was the outline of a train, but there was something horribly wrong about it. The train appeared only in flashes, like a silhouette of something that didn't belong in the real world. It would materialize in one spot, then vanish in an instant, only to appear again in a different location. I tried to rationalize it. It's just a trick of the light, I told myself, a figment of your imagination. But then a metallic clang sounded in the distance, followed by another whistle, a bone-chilling, haunting cry that seemed to send vibrations through my body. I looked at the old train tracks to my left, and for the first time, I noticed something odd. The tracks seemed glowing, not in the usual way that reflections catch the light, but glowing with an unnatural light, faint but undeniably there. I felt my heart race as the sound of the phantom train grew louder. It was coming closer. Before I could even react, the car's engine sputtered, cutting out suddenly. I panicked. "Not now," I muttered under my breath, my hands trembling as I tried to restart the engine. Nothing. I could hear the phantom train getting closer now, the sound of metal wheels scraping against the rails. And then, through the dark, I saw it. A long line of carriages, glowing with an ethereal light, moving faster than any train should. But this train had no passengers. It was empty. The windows were dark, and there was no sound of life within. My eyes went wide as the train came closer. My body froze. The whistle blew again, and the air grew colder still. The faint outline of figures seemed to appear inside the train. Figures that shouldn't have been there. Ghostly faces staring out from the windows, their eyes hollow and empty. Just as the train passed by, I heard a voice, quiet, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. It was a whisper, like someone calling my name. I jerked my head to the side, my heart leaping in my chest. No one was there, but the voice lingered, a soft, eerie echo in the back of my mind. The train was gone. The air grew still. The only sound was the hum of my car's engine, now miraculously back on. I didn't question it. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal and drove straight out of Ogden Canyon as fast as I could. I didn't look back, and I didn't stop until I was safely out of the canyon's grip. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The image of those hollow eyes staring out from the train's windows haunted me. I couldn't explain what I saw, but I knew one thing. Ogden Canyon is not a place to be trifled with, and to this day, I wonder if I'll ever encounter that ghost train again. To anyone who might venture near Ogden Canyon, be cautious. The ghost train of Ogden Canyon is real. People have disappeared there, and others have heard the sounds of the phantom locomotive in the dead of night. If you ever hear that whistle echoing in the distance, I strongly suggest you turn around and leave, because some things that live in the canyon shouldn't be seen by mortal eyes. Stay safe, and don't let curiosity lead you to a place where the spirits of the past still ride the tracks. The moment I stepped foot inside Waverly Hills Sanatorium, I could feel the weight of its tragic history. But what happened next? It's something I'll never forget. We'd heard the rumors about the cursed train, the one that used to carry the dead from the hospital's morgue down a track that's no longer in use. We thought it was just a story until we heard the unmistakable sound of train wheels on metal echoing through the empty halls. And then, as we walked deeper into the darkness, something or someone whispered my name. It wasn't my imagination. I was about to learn that Waverly Hills holds more than just spirits. It holds something far worse. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. My friends and I had explored countless haunted locations, armed with cameras and our usual skepticism. But there was something different about Waverly Hills. This wasn't just another spooky mansion or empty building. This place had history. Dark, tragic history. Waverly Hills was built in 1910 as a tuberculosis sanatorium, a place where people came to die. Thousands perished here, and the facility gained an infamous reputation for its high death rate. Treatments were cruel, often ineffective, and many patients were left to die in isolation. But what really struck me was the part of the story no one talks about: the train. There used to be a rail line that ran beside the sanatorium, carrying more than just supplies. Locals claim the train was used to transport the dead, piles of bodies that the hospital couldn't deal with fast enough. There's even an eerie story about a tunnel known as the body chute, where bodies were secretly taken down to avoid alarming the living patients. On the night we decided to explore, I was more interested in capturing some footage than in the history. After all, it was just a legend, right? We arrived at the sanatorium around 10:30 p.m. The building stood against the dark sky like a giant skeleton, its windows dark and lifeless. We immediately split into groups, planning to meet up after an hour. My group started in the main building, room after room of peeling paint, decaying furniture, and thick silence. It was unsettling, but not exactly terrifying. Then we came across a room that was different, a small rusted door at the end of a hallway. It wasn't marked on any map we'd seen of the sanatorium, and the door itself looked as though it hadn't been opened in decades. We found a small key on the ground near the door, one that seemed to match. Without thinking much of it, we opened the door. Inside, there was nothing but a darkened hallway, and at the end of it, tracks. I'm not talking about a small piece of train track. I'm talking about a full, rusted rail line running straight into the darkness. It looked ancient, completely out of place in this abandoned building. I swear to you, I could feel the cold air drop around us as soon as we stepped in front of the tracks. None of us said anything, but we all felt it. Something was wrong. We weren't far down the tracks when we heard it. The sound of metal grinding on metal, faint at first, like a distant rumble in the earth, but it grew louder, closer, until I felt the vibrations through my feet. It wasn't a train coming from outside. It was coming from the tunnel itself. My heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Everyone nodded. I felt my breath catch in my throat as the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was like the train was getting closer, and fast. I pulled out my camera, desperate to catch any evidence of what was happening. The sound of the train was deafening now, and I couldn't make sense of it. It felt like the whole building was trembling beneath us. "Let's go," someone said, their voice shaky. But before we could turn to leave, the unmistakable sound of a train whistle echoed through the tunnel, so loud it rattled my skull. I froze. There was no train in sight, but I could hear the wheels, the screech of metal on metal, and then something else. A whisper. My name. It came from the darkness. John ... I turned around, breath caught in my chest. No one else had said anything. I stared into the blackness, my camera shaking in my hands. "Did anyone hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "John, it's time." The whisper came again. I was sure I was imagining things, until I saw it. The faint outline of a figure, a shadow moving along the tracks. Not a person, but something else. I blinked, and it vanished. We bolted. Everyone was panicked now. The camera lights flashed as we ran, but it was like the tunnel had stretched, the tracks endless. The sound of the train was still there, closer than ever, the whistle deafening. But the worst part wasn't the noise. It was the feeling, like something was right behind us. We made it to the end of the tunnel, breathless, hearts racing, and when we turned to look back, nothing. the train had disappeared. We didn't stay long after that. We left the sanatorium, shaken and confused. None of us knew exactly what we'd experienced, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us out. I thought I was just going to be a regular commuter, just another person riding the Tokyo subway on my way home from work. But as I stepped onto that crowded train, I had no idea that I was about to witness something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't the train's usual squeals or the bustle of tired passengers. It was the smell, a thick, metallic scent that filled the air, and a feeling of unease that washed over me. And then, as the train jolted forward, I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the platform, eyes vacant, and her body began to move. I wasn't just watching a suicide. I was watching something far darker, something that would follow me long after I left the train. Keep watching. What happened next is something I'll never forget. It was an ordinary evening in Tokyo. Rush hour, the city alive with the sounds of hurried footsteps and impatient commuters. I'd just finished a long day at work and was on my way home, like I did every evening. The Tokyo subway system is always packed during peak hours, and I had grown used to the crush of bodies and the sense of anonymity that comes with being surrounded by hundreds of strangers. I remember that day well. Everything felt normal. The train was packed as usual, and I was standing by one of the poles, clutching my bag, my eyes drifting between the digital signboards and the passing stations. I wasn't paying much attention to the other passengers, as everyone kept to themselves in that strange, unspoken silence that is common on the trains. People were on their phones, reading, or simply staring blankly ahead, lost in their thoughts. As the train lurched forward, there was a slight shift in the air, a strange heaviness, like the atmosphere had thickened. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it in my chest. The faint smell of something metallic, mixed with the usual scent of stale air and cologne, filled my nostrils. It wasn't anything particularly alarming, but it was enough to make me uneasy. We stopped at a station, Shibuya, I think, and I looked up as the doors opened to let more people on. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the platform, just outside the doors, a woman in her late 20s, dressed in an unremarkable outfit, but there was something about her that made my stomach twist. Her eyes were vacant, staring straight ahead, and she was standing far too close to the edge of the platform. The door slid closed, and I turned my attention back to the inside of the train. But as the train began to pull away, I caught a glimpse of her in the reflection of the glass. Her face was now turned toward me, empty, hollow, like she wasn't really there. And then, without warning, she stepped forward, falling onto the tracks. For a moment, time seemed to stop. My mind couldn't process what had just happened. I heard the screams of the people around me, followed by the sound of the emergency brake being pulled. The train screeched to a halt, and the entire car was filled with confusion and panic. I could feel my heart racing as I stood there, frozen. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the spot on the platform where she had fallen. The reality of what I had just seen hit me like a wave. I had witnessed someone take their life, but it was more than that. There was something wrong, something unnatural about her presence. The train didn't move for what felt like an eternity. The police arrived, and the entire platform was swarmed with officers and paramedics. The passengers around me were in shock, talking amongst themselves in hushed voices, trying to piece together what had happened. But all I could think about was the woman, the vacant look in her eyes, the strange heaviness in the air before the incident. The police started questioning passengers, and I overheard a few whispers from other commuters. Apparently, there had been a string of suicides on the Tokyo trains that year, an unsettling number of people deciding to end their lives in such a public way. But something felt different about this one. Something felt wrong. I decided to leave the train at the next station. I didn't want to stay any longer. The moment I stepped off the train and onto the platform, I felt an oppressive weight settle over me. It was like I had brought something with me, an energy that I couldn't shake. But what scared me most was the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was as though something had followed me off the train, and it lingered just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the hollow eyes staring back at me, that vacant expression that had been burned into my memory. It felt as if I could hear her voice calling to me, whispering in the dead of night, her presence looming over me. I tried to convince myself that it was just the trauma of seeing such a thing, that it was natural to be shaken by something as horrific as a suicide. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just the image of her that haunted me. It was the strange energy I felt before and after the incident. Something had shifted that day. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't just my imagination. 1 week later, I found myself standing at the Shibuya station again. I hadn't planned to go back, but something had drawn me there, a force I couldn't explain. The train I had been on when I saw the woman was scheduled to arrive in just a few minutes. As I stood on the platform, the familiar sound of the train's arrival echoed in my ears. And then, there it was, the same train, the same people. I stepped inside, trying to act normal, trying to push down the fear that was beginning to rise in my chest. But the moment the doors closed and the train began to move, I felt it. The same heaviness in the air, the same metallic scent. And there, at the far end of the car, I saw her again, the woman from the tracks. She was standing there, not moving, staring at me with the same hollow, vacant eyes. I froze, unable to move or look away. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished, as if she had never been there at all. But I knew she was still with me.